Hello, gorgeous friends. So, Maz and I wanted to make this free little workshop here on how you can make your own medicine using one of the methods of tincturing called the folk method. And we're super passionate about A, making medicine, but B, empowering you to make your own medicine and get to know the plants that are around you in your local area, because that is one of the most potent ways to use herbal medicine and to start integrating herbal medicine into your life. And we'll make medicine forever, but it really takes it to another level when you can start making medicine for yourself. And one of my herbal teachers always said everything you need is always within 100 kilometers of where you live. And I think that's a really potent way of thinking about herbalism and healing ourselves, and really getting in touch with the environment around us. So what we're going to do today is called the folk method of tincturing, and I'm going to talk about a couple of the methods of tincturing, just to give you a little know-how and rundown of how it works. So the folk method is basically you take your herb, you cut it up, you put it in a jar, and you cover it with alcohol. Most of the time it's done with fresh herbs, although you can do this with dried herbs as well. The next method we have is the scientific method. This is the method that Maz and I use most commonly in our tinctures and our product line, because with the scientific method, you know how much herb you're getting per milliliter of alcohol. So often when you see tinctures with the scientific method, they will have a ratio. Typically it's anywhere from 1 in 2 to 1 in 10. Most commonly we see 1 in 2 for fresh herbs, and then our dried herbs, they're often about a 1 in 3 or 1 in 5, and then our really potent herbs, or ones that tend to be more poisonous sometimes, are a 1 in 10. And that just ensures that it's easier to use them in a safer way. So what that ratio means is we have 1 gram of herb per, if it's a 1 in 2, 2 milliliters of alcohol. So you would need to take 2 milliliters of liquid in order to ingest 1 gram of the herb, and that helps us understand our dosing, and makes sure that we're getting enough herbs, or making sure that we're not taking too much. The third method of tincturing is called a sock slit, and this is a more alchemical way of tincturing. You need a glass contraption, and what it does is it heats the alcohol in a base, and then the alcohol goes through the mark, which is your cut up herb, and then it condenses and comes down into the collection part of the glass apparatus. I definitely suggest Googling what that looks like. It's really cool and a scientific looking piece of lab equipment. But what's really nice about a sock slit is it lets you make a tincture in a couple hours, where the scientific method and the folk method both require 30 to 40 days of tincturing and sitting, and for you to be shaking the tincture every day. So when we're doing the folk method and the scientific method, these are both different types of macerations. I'm not sure where the root of the word maceration comes from, but what you'll see we'll be doing is, once I put all the herbs in the jar, is you have to shake that every day. And what the shaking does is it helps break down the cell walls of the plant, and it helps move the medicinal compounds from the plant material into the liquid. And that's another reason why we use alcohol as well, because it's a really potent solvent. And in herbal medicine, we want that because we want to dissolve the boundaries of the plant and the cell walls of that plant and move those medicinal qualities into the alcohol so that you can ingest them.
I'm going to tincture some of this for myself, but for all of you, we choose to use herbs that have not been grown in the city, because I feel, just the waterways, the way it rains, the groundwater, like there is pollution here, and it sneaks in subtle ways. And we personally try to make medicine that we sell with as much like purity and integrity as possible. But that being said, it doesn't, like, if you can grow your own herbs, that's, I think, and make medicine from it, like, that's the best, you know. But the lemon balm we'll be using in this year's batch of Nourishing Greens is coming from Vancouver Island. Laura, as you have seen, is harvesting that, or you will see, depending on how we thread this video together. So yeah, you want to be mindful about where you get your herbs from. And we do work to source all the ones we cannot harvest ourselves from organic herb sources. And there's many layers to that. There's a lot to be mindful of, you know, like who's actually being impacted by the growing of this medicine. Because ultimately that's an energy that gets contained in the batch itself. And how far is it coming from too, you know, like we definitely do not source herbs from China because they do not have very good practices over there. And it's like, yes, it could be from an organic farm, but is there like tons of spraying of glyphosates in that area where there happens to be this one organic farm? So really doing your research around where you're getting your medicine, where you're getting your herbs from is super important. Sorry if my eyes are kind of all over the place. It's really bright. I'm learning how to make videos. And then, yeah, in general, if you can make a fresh tincture from a fresh herb, they're so potent. I really love it. But once in a while, certain herbs are better when they are dried. So you just want to do some research into that. Definitely things that are aromatic, like lemon balm, mint, thyme, like all these ones with like lots of volatile oils, like they're so much better when they're fresh. And then also certain ones where like cleavers, I find just so much better fresh. Like they're so like fine and spindly, and they work on the waters of the body that I feel like you just want those waters that like naturally are in the plant to be in the medicine. So that's just something to consider. However, you know, if all you have access to is a dried herb, like go for it. I feel like 90% of the time it will be just as good. And again, like I said, there are some that are better dried. So that it just depends on what constituents you're looking to extract. So that is something to be mindful of. And yeah, again, like we choose to use organic herbs. I personally think that glyphosates and other pesticides, herbicides, all of that is detrimental to the planet and to our physiology. And so that's where we're at. However, you know, if like you don't have access to organic herbs, fuck it, you know, who cares? Like you're just needing to make medicine to take care of yourself, maybe to take care of someone in your family. Like it's still going to work. It's still going to be powerful. You can't take the medicine out of the medicine, you know? So just do what's right for you and what's accessible to you, and see how it goes, you know? And in terms of alcohol, we also only use organic alcohol. This has been a journey of figuring out how to do that, how to source that. The laws in Canada changed in terms of distributing like large quantities of high proof organic alcohol. And so there's been things we've had to navigate, but we figured it out and we've been really committed to it because the alcohol, it's, you know, they call it spirits because it contains a spirit. It contains an energy of a certain plant. And with medicine making, it's like we really want a high quality spirit because that's what holds the medicine. And you're consuming that, you know. And for like me, I'm actually taking up to like 15 milliliters of one tincture a day, and I do take some other ones too because I'm in a pretty deep healing process, but that definitely like builds up over time. Yeah, and if you're like new to this, you're experimenting, you just want to try making something to see how it goes, like pick up a bottle of Everclear. I've made tons of medicine with Everclear in the past and it's worked. It's been super beneficial. So yeah, and then, you know, obviously depending on the percentages, in general, you can just pick up a bottle of like 40, 50 proof, whatever from the shop and make a tincture, and it's gonna be great. A lot of the most potent medicine that I've worked with actually is this from my teacher in the Kootenays, Shanoon, who, harvests like wild medicine from the mountains, pours like regular 40 proof over it, and that medicine's just so potent because it's fresh harvested from the mountains. It's like so just has this mountain energy that is strong, and I've noticed changes in my body in like a couple days from this medicine. And so your relationship first and foremost with all the different components is like very powerful. It's like anything, the more you know the story and the more there's that intimate relationship with what you're creating, there's a certain level of like sacredness and like integrity held in that I feel like actually adds a potency to the medicine. And like speaking of that, like going back to the relationships with plants, we are doing a plant communications, plant intelligence, plant relationship course coming up in July. We're super excited about it. So if you want to learn more, there'll be more information attached to this video, but we will be working on how to cultivate deeper relationships with plants so that you can actually intuitively understand their medicine and intuitively understand when to use them. Because as much as there is infinite actions to memorize and infinite constituents to understand and how they work in the body and this, that, and the other, there's a lot to be said for just your relationship with the plant. And it's really unique to every person. And I feel like in these times, the more we can build those relationships to non-human nature, the better. We really need to be developing that sense of connection. So yeah, we're offering this course and we'll tell you more about that in a little bit. And then another note on the types of alcohol. In general, like I was saying, like you can just use 40% whatever, mix it up, cover your herb in the jar, and you're gonna make some medicine. However, there are certain medicines, like we use very specific percentages of alcohol depending on what plant we're using because they do all vary. Lemon balm might only be like 35%. And you do, when you are tincturing things fresh, need to take into account that because there is a natural amount of water within the plant, the fresh plant, it will dilute the alcohol, and you'd never want to be going below 20-25% or it can go rancid. And obviously alcohol is a natural preservative. That's part of what makes tinctures so incredible because they have a very long shelf life when stored in cool, dark places. And so just being mindful, like not to just tincture something fresh with like a 25% alcohol, but making sure it's a little bit like 10% higher so that it'll account for that discrepancy or adjustment. And yeah, I know like calendula, for example, if you tincture it at a super high percentage, it ends up extracting like the antifungal qualities of it, which aren't extracted at a lower percentage. The folk method is awesome and has its limitations, and so that's something that you can explore. There's tons of resources out there. I know Scott Clues has a really awesome, it's like a brochure. If you just Google Scott Clues School of Forest Medicine, and it has like all these different local plants of the Pacific Northwest with the ratios they prefer to be tinctured at, and if it's best fresh or dry, and if there is what percentage they like to be tinctured at. So yeah, and just like getting clear with like why you want to make the medicine. Like, what is this medicine for? And when you're going to work with your herb, like really being clear and like having a chat, like, thank you, I'm this is what I'm using you for, and asking it permission, and yeah, having that clear intention of what you're making the medicine for is really important. So another thing that you can incorporate into your medicine making process is the astrological cycles or cosmological cycles, depending on what astrological system you follow. If this is something you're interested in, this is kind of one of the key tenets of alchemy and making alchemical preparations like spagyric medicine is the planetary and astral timing. So, we offered a whole course on this. If you look up House of Origins on YouTube, you can check out the Planetary Days of the Week series that we did. It's up there for free, and we talk about the planetary energy of each day of the week. And so, lemon balm is classically associated with Jupiter. And so if you wanted to get really harness in that like energy of Jupiter and that like benevolent, exuberant, joyous force and take that to a whole other level, you can harvest it on a Thursday, which is the day of Jupiter. And then you can Google online like planetary timing hours, and there's all these different websites that actually have the planetary hours. There's methods to calculate them as well by hand. That's beyond the scope of this video. That's a whole alchemical technique into of itself. But yeah, you can also do it on the Jupiter hour, on the Jupiter day, and then you have a super Jupiter medicine. And there's different ways you can do this too. Like, let's say for me, I'm wanting to really use this medicine to support my digestive tract and like the irritated sort of inflamed like mucosal membranes and just those delicate membranes of that lining, which are very much associated with the moon and also Venus. So it's like, oh, maybe it's actually good to be doing it on a Venus day. And with planetary timing, astrological correspondences, there's so many different layers. Like, yes, this is lemon balm, because it's so aromatic and oily, it has this Jupiterian quality to it, but perfectly enough, it's Gemini season, and it can be really good for Gemini people and helping soothe the nervous tension that can be a result of Gemini in excess. So there's a lot of layers to the astrological timing. We will be going into astrological correspondences in our plant communications, plant intelligence course. So if that's something that interests you, we will be diving into that a little bit and giving you some basic outlines for how you can sort of discover those correspondences within the plants themselves.
All right, so I'm almost ready to start tincturing. So let's just go over the supplies you need to make a folk method tincture. You have your herb, cutting board. I have a knife to cut this up. We do want to cut our herb not super fine, but cutting it up means that you're increasing the surface area that the alcohol can come in contact with the plant, which means that it's going to be able to bring out more of those medicinal qualities and have an easier time doing so. I have my empty jar for my tincture, and then I have my 40% alcohol. Good thing to note when you are tincturing fresh herb, there's water content in fresh plants, so you do want to tincture with a higher proof than you want to end up with. So even though I'm tincturing at 40%, my final percentage is going to be less than that because of the water in this leaf. And with the folk method, you don't actually know what your final percentage is. And to test the percentage of alcohol, you do need a little bit of a fancy contraption. So, yeah, general rule of thumb is tincture with 40% or higher for fresh tinctures. And some people will tincture multiple plants at once. We don't do that, and we don't like to do that because each plant likes to be tinctured at a different percentage, depending on what constituents you want to get out of it. For example, something like a root will require a higher percentage than something like this leaf. And that's just because of the different constituent profiles, the different molecules and chemicals that are in those plants, and how they act in alcohol. And the other thing too is the folk method is amazing for fresh plants, really good for flowers and leaves, but it's not so good for things like medicinal mushrooms. For medicinal mushrooms, we like to do dual extraction, where you have a water extraction, like a decoction, and then you have an alcohol extraction, like a tincture, and then you blend them together. And why we do this is because different constituents come out in different solvents. So some things come out in water really easily, and some things come out in alcohol really easily. And you kind of have to get to know your plants and what exactly it is that you're using them for, to decide what percentage to tincture them at and what herbal preparation method is the best. So I'm just going to chop this up here. Doesn't have to be super clean. We just want to break it up a little bit. And I've gone ahead and taken these leaves off of the stems already. I prefer to do this because I harvested like the whole stalks. And I'll show you. Like some of these are pretty thick and woody, and a little hard to cut through, and I just like having a higher concentration of the leaf. That's where the medicine is, but there's absolutely no harm in tincturing the stems of lemon balm. And a fun fact, all of the stems of mint family plants are square, and that is one of the defining features of mint family, which is pretty cool. That looks pretty good to me. See, you can kind of see, not super fine, but definitely in like 1.5 inch chunks here. So let's fill our jar. But one of the reasons I love making medicine this way is how long-standing this tradition is, and how many herbalists, home herbalists, and witchy people have used this method to make their medicine. And also a word of caution too, if you're using any, I definitely would not do this method with any herbs that are dosage specific or have any kind of toxicity in them. Certain herbs are medicinal in certain doses, and then it can be easy to get a toxic dose. So I would 100% not do this method if you're using anything that has any slight level of toxicity to it. Something like lemon balm, a lot of our mint family plants, these are very gentle remedies, and you can take quite a lot of them. So the folk method is quite safe in terms of not knowing your final concentration or your final ratio. So you want to pack it in there quite tight. The tighter you pack it, the stronger your medicine is going to be. And we like that. We like strong medicine. And this is one of my favorite parts. And then you're just going to take your alcohol and fill your jar. And you want your herb to be completely covered and submerged in the alcohol. So that there's no parts sticking out on the top, because that will cause oxidation, and you'll see that any parts that are sticking out will turn brown, and we don't want that. So the alcohol preserves the freshness of the herb, right? So we want to maintain that and preserve that in the whole tincture. So now we wait. We have to play the waiting game, and always label your medicine, what it is, the date, and everything. and then you'll know when to strain it as well. So you want to keep this in a cool, dark place. Tinctures don't like heat and they don't like sunlight. Exposing them to heat and sunlight will degrade the medicine, and UV light damages plant material. So you want to keep this in a cool, dry place, and preferably somewhere where you're going to see it as well, because we want to shake it like this every day for 30 days. Maz and I do a lot of shaking in our apothecary. We have, you know, maybe 10 to 15 jars on the go at any given time. And you really want to give it a good shake for at least a minute or two every day to really help move those medicinal qualities from the leaf into the alcohol. So the more you shake it, the stronger your medicine will be. All right, and come back for straining time.
Hey friends, so we're just going to talk about straining the medicine. I have a different tincture here than lemon balm because the lemon balm's not ready yet and we really wanted to get this video out to you, but we do have some wild crafted bleeding heart, which is really awesome. So obviously you need your tincture. It has to have been a month. We talked about all this. You will also need a jar funnel. Not necessary, but jar funnels are super awesome. Also, a strainer, a bowl. I am a huge dork and prefer to use rubber gloves because it's alcohol, and if you're straining a bunch of medicine, it can just be really drying on your hands. Also, if you're wearing like nail polish, the alcohol will like nail polish remove it off. So I prefer that, you know, it's just better for me. And nut milk bag, way better than cheesecloth. Hit the nut milk bag. These have been an awesome discovery. Those cloth ones, they do disintegrate. I have found some plastic ones over the years. Again, who knows though, the plastic could be questionable, but those ones do seem to last a lot longer. And if you get a really high quality nut bag, they're a lot finer, the holes, and so your tincture will be guaranteed less sedimenty, depending on what you're tincturing as well. Obviously, something like this isn't going to have a lot of sediment, but anyways, so you want to make sure everything's super clean, like spray your area. Even if stuff has like been in the cupboards, like just, I like to give it all a good like rinse. So anyways, pop your gloves on and get your nut milk bag out. Ooh, look at this one's got a little, wow, okay, so they're all kind of different too. Wow, okay, I'm gonna actually do this a different way, conveniently. Let me get a jar, 1 second. Okay, so generally I do this with a bowl, but this nut milk bag is really epic and has this little hole. So I'm gonna do this in here because it just looks better. This jar did just come out of the dishwasher, so it's all good. Okay, so then you just do this, pour it out, and obviously, I wonder, oh yeah. Okay, this is experimental. I've never done it with a nut milk bag quite like this, so we're just gonna figure it out here. There we go, okay. So then you wanna get all of your herb in here. If you have a tincture press, you can use one. We do have one that we use for all of our medicine, but because this is about the folk method, we're just squeezing it out. And, you know, you just I kind of like to make sure I'm squeezing like all different parts because the herb absorbs a lot. So you just take your time, squeeze it away. Making sure you got every last drop. And so why we have a press is because it really Make sure you get every last drop. This is why your little bags can get worn out, you know, it's a lot of like pressure on them. Okay. So that's looking pretty dry. So once it's dry, you can just set this to the side. You know, I'm never concerned about making a mess because you just clean it up. Then I like to use a secondary sieve for the pouring just to make sure there's no bits that fell in there. And look, there were a couple, so that's good. And there you have it. Your tincture, ready to go. I generally just use the same lid, you know, the same jar that had the original batch, and since I didn't do that because of this interesting funnel situation, we're not going to do that, but you can reuse the label, because you want to label everything. Boom! Just like that. Your tincture is ready. Enjoy, my friends.